Hey everybody, this is Dan. I'm here. I'm going to do some paintovers. I just want to check and make sure that my live stream is actually working because it's been frozen for a couple days. I think it's working. So if you can hear me, please sound off in the chat. Let me know. It's a beautiful day here today. So I've got my door open. I live on the waterfront. So you might hear a lot of noise because I know that the microphones in these MacBooks, these iMacs are like notoriously sensitive. So if it's really loud, I apologize. You might hear some planes flying overhead. You might hear some people working on their boats out in the marina. I apologize if that is the case. But it's too nice, so I'm going to keep my window open. It's too nice. So I'm going to crit this character, then I'm going to finish the airship crit I was doing the other day. First thing with this guy is he was hugging all the edges of the canvas really tight, so oops. I'm going to very quickly just extend the canvas. I might recrop it later once we start getting into changing the actual painting, but for now, I'm going to use this as a placeholder. But yeah. Give me just a second here to block this in. Hopefully my live stream keeps working. It's been strangely buggy the past couple days. I'm not sure exactly why. Sometimes it decides it's going to do that, and there's really nothing you can do. If you're on the Mac client, there's really nothing you can do except wait. If anybody knows any tricks to getting it to be a little more cooperative, I'd love to hear them. Because, yeah. It's one of those things where when it happens, you're just kind of resigned to not have live stream. But anyway, so this piece is obviously it's a character. It's some kind of orc dude or goblin dude. I'm going to say it's an orc guy. He feels very Mongolian, so I've pulled up some reference of some Mongolian armor that I'm sure you've all seen on Tumblrs and Google on the side. I'm not going to be reffing it directly. I'm just pulling it up for like a culture stylistic feel of what a well-armored guy from this kind of culture would wear, just to inform some stylistic decisions. But yeah, so first impressions, the anatomy is definitely pretty good. You're able to draw. There's some wonky things, like the back arm is bigger than the front arm, which doesn't make sense in the perspective. But yeah, there's... Overall, it's pretty good, though. Like, the drawing's a little stiff, but that's okay. But your proportions are looking pretty good. In terms of the dude being an orc, it kind of feels like you had a photo of either yourself or a friend, and you kind of turned it into an orc, because he feels extremely human. I might play with that a bit. This might be a character for a game that has a specific art style that looks this way. But I don't know if it is. If anyone does know that, again, please sound off in the chat. But yeah, I might orc them up a bit as we go forward. I'm just looking at this real quick to kind of take it in. Okay. Cool. So, I'm going to get started here. Probably going to be going for a while. My schedule got kind of weird last week because of live stream deciding it wasn't going to let me do anything. So, yeah, I'm going to make up for some lost time and start on this week as well. So, first thing, let's see. I'm going to grab some of this gray, and this, light on light is never a good idea. If the background is light, you want to tilt that X ever so slightly into the shadow so it pops out. Light on light, it's bad. Because then you lose the shape. Let's see. It also feels very geometric for this culture, so I'm going to give the blade a bit more of a curve. There's a lot of, in the metal work, you know, for this culture, if we're going off of what appears to be kind of Mongolian, maybe Northern Asian, something between medieval Russian and Mongolian back in the Genghis days. You know, the blades have a lot more of a curve to them, and yeah, there's a lot more. They're basically designed, the reason the culture looks the way it does is they're designed to be on horseback, so curved things go through the air better. They're easier to handle, you know, they're designed specifically to be that way, so little tiny things like that, because if it's just a flat, you know, arrow shape, it feels more like it might graze off of something if it hits it because of the straight edges. It might slide off it. It also feels, for a fantasy setting, it also feels a lot more like something like a dwarf guy would probably have. So I'm going to play with that. Okay, so right off the bat, let's look at some stuff with the armor. So, okay, right off the bat, these reddish pants going into this white right here, they become Santa Claus pants. So don't do that. Think about the kind of animal that these guys would be killing where they are. They're probably not going to have white fur unless it's some kind of like really, really gray fox thing. Like if I look at this dude over here, it makes sense. The fur looks like he killed some kind of fox, or it's a pelt off of, you know, some colored animal that blends in with the grass and the surrounding. Like, you know, white feels polar. You know, either they found an albino thing or it's polar, because animals naturally adapt to be the same colors as the areas they live in, predominantly. So having just white fur feels very strange. So I'm going to make it a bit more. I'm actually going to do this on a multiply layer, just because I want to keep the brushwork you've got. I'm just going to make it a little darker, a little grayer, and a little more brown, so it doesn't feel so Christmassy against the red. I'm also going to do that in here. And I'm also, when I zoom in and I start doing some little stuff, I'm going to try and make it look more like a pelt and less like, you know, fake fur. Because right now it's very fluffy, it's very cottony. It feels almost like the tinsel that you'd put on a Christmas tree. But, you know, you want to get in there and actually show that it's a pelt, that it came from something they skinned, and there's a very specific texture that that stuff has. It's a lot of layering, it's a lot of modding, you know, just from a distance. If I do little things like this that show little interruptions in the fur, little folds and stuff like that, like instantly it starts to look like something that was skinned, that's actually, you know, there and not some kind of man-made faux fur thing. But just very quickly, I'm going to rough in some of that. I'll clean it up in a bit. Light source seems pretty well defined. It's over here. Because of the hard shadow on this guy's face, it feels like the sun is this way, but because this dude has his leg lit up and his arm lit up, it's making me think it's supposed to be 3/4. And if it's 3/4, that means that there's going to be some light catching in the face. So you got to do this. I hope that makes sense, because if I zoom out, if this arm's catching light and this leg's catching light, then that means that the sun is at 3/4 over here, kind of facing the same direction his nose is. The way you've lit his face implies it's directly to the side, over here to the right, but the lighting on the rest of the body doesn't follow that, so I'm going to bring some of this in over here very quickly. I'm going to rough it in, extend this over a bit. This will make the face pop a bit more too in the composition, because it'll be, you know, catching more light against the shadow on it. So that's always good. Over here, down here, and then yeah, and the nose, bring it all the way over to the side of the bridge. hair, and then in the eyes. So again, there's a bit of a problem with the eyes, but I'll fix that when I get into the face. But yeah. So again, maybe you had a reference for the face, maybe you shot reference, maybe you had a model on your desk and you were painting it from life. Maybe you had a photo of a friend, maybe you found a photo on Google, and maybe this was the lighting in that reference, but I can tell that you didn't have a reference for the rest of the body, and that you made up the lighting to suit it, and it becomes very apparent that one thing was looked at and the rest of it was kind of made up. So unifying your lighting is the quickest way to make it look like everything's coming from the same source. Now with the eyes, they're kind of looking in two different directions. One eye's 3/4 pointing this way, the other eye's 3/4 pointing that way. It's making it look like his eyes are wrapped around his head. So I'm gonna change that real quick. Just gonna pull this one over. Just a bit. So it's very clearly looking the same direction as the other eye. Small things like that are the difference between a character looking goofy and strange and a character looking, you know, cool in the way you intended them to look. Nothing ruins a character concept faster than the eyes not making sense, because that's one of the things that we all sort of gravitate towards in a piece. But yeah. You've got some bounce lighting over here that I'm going to pull into this side of the face a little bit, just to unify the look, because it's showing up in some places and not showing up in others. Really going to pop that jaw, which makes sense for the desert he's in, because sand is extremely reflective and skin is extremely reflective because it's, you know, oily. So no shame in popping that chin. Then over here, if you look, this is not in line with this over here. This edge of the chin is much lower than this one, so I'm going to hike this up to something like that. Pull that neck in a bit to show that it's turning somewhat. Same thing over here. The musculature of the neck is a bit wonky, but it's not a priority right now. I would say definitely look at it, but you know, you want to make it very clear where the Adam's apple is, because he's very clearly a dude. Have it catching some light, you know, get the twist right. But I'm just going to rough that in and move on to other stuff. So, see how that just kind of makes him look less like a sort of beat up Frankenstein and more like he's, you know, existing in that environment. Gonna deepen the shadows in the ears a bit. Same thing over here. Alright. I'm going to take this bounce light color, get it in the ear as well, so it's unified. And again, sorry if it's really noisy in the background. I've got my slider doors wide open. I'm letting in the sea breeze. to grab your lightest value that you've got in your face. I'm going to punch it up a bit more. Not totally white, but closer. I'm going to add some specularity in a couple spots just to make it feel more like skin, and to make it feel like this is the side that's facing the light. Just some little edge defining stuff with this bright light, just to really show what stuff is catching and what stuff isn't. Vice versa, I'm gonna really show the depths of the nostrils, because this is like an orc guy, and you want to have that kind of, you know, they've got a kind of warthog thing going on, human hybrid in the face. Probably going to pull these eyebrows out too. Make them a little bit more bestial than just the dude's eyebrows. Hope this is making sense. Is this yours, Vithor? That's your name, right? In the artcamp chat? Or on the site, rather? I think this is yours, so you can answer questions for me if I need questions answered. So, again, just going to bounce some light in a couple spots, because he's catching a lot of sunlight. I'm going to darken areas that are deeper in shadow. Show the underside of the nostrils, bottom of the curve of the nose, and pull the ball of the nose down just a tiny bit and center it. Cool. Alright, good to have you. I'm glad the person who painted it is in the chat. That's helpful. So is this a character you created? Is this fan art? Is this, you know, what kind of stuff do you want to do? I think, did you say you wanted to do Magic the Gathering stuff? I can't remember. Something's still wonky. I think it's this pupil right here. It's still wandering off a little too much to the side. Okay. Alright, move on to some other stuff. Question in the chat. Let me read it real quick so people watching on demand know what I'm talking about. Hey Dan, if there's a job opening at a game company and you meet most of the requirements, but say they ask for examples of UI design and you don't have that, would you recommend just applying anyway, or do you think the ADs would view that as wasting their time and you as someone who doesn't pay attention? Basically being fit for 80-90% of the job, but not everything they list. So a common thing that happens when companies are trying to hire people is they say that they want a one-size-fits-all artist. in the requirements they'll say like, we want characters, we want environments, we want UI, we want weapons, we want items, we want, you know, basically every possible thing. And the reason they do that is because game companies on the whole are shrinking right now. Studios are shrinking, everyone's kind of downsizing, there's been tons of closures, and they want to know that if there's layoffs, the people that they keep can handle the jobs of the people that might have been canned. They want to know that, you know, regardless of what happens in the future with their comings and goings in terms of their corporate, you know, firing, basically, the corporation decides to get rid of a bunch of people. They want to know that the people that are left can handle the workload of the ones that are gone. So when they hire an artist, increasingly, not everywhere, but increasingly in the industry, artist is like, in quotations, it's like a blanket term for everything 2D. In some companies, it's everything 2D and everything 3D, where they want the 2D artists to actually know how to model their own stuff to save money and manpower and all that. So, again, it's not everywhere; it's just on the rise. So I would say when you apply, actually just address it in the letter with your portfolio and just say, hey, you know, I love your company. I'd really love to work for you. I'm a 2D guy. Here's my resume. Here's my portfolio. I've never done UI before, but I think I could. Do you have an art test or something like that? Like, I think that would be the right way to approach it. Don't just not acknowledge it if they specifically ask for UI. Just say, oh, you know what? I've never had an opportunity to do that, but I'd really love to. I think I'd be good at it. Could you give me an art test if that's something that's very important that you'd want to see? And your willingness to do an art test would probably, you know, help out significantly if it's something they care about. Maybe they don't care about it and it's just something that they have to put out there for all their interview stuff to hopefully get somebody who does, you know. Maybe they'll hire you anyway, but you don't know that. But yeah, I would say as long as you address it in the letter to make it clear that you read it, even if you don't have it but you have the other 90%, I think it's okay. The flip side of that is if you've got the time and you want to, you could actually drum up some UI stuff and just do it yourself and just, you know, have it and force yourself to make it and then just send those and maybe say in the email, you know, I've never done UI before, but I saw that it was a requirement. I really want this job, so I made this up. Is this the kind of UI you're talking about? And then, you know, if they're any kind of company that respects that sort of initiative, they're going to go, oh, you know, this person actually did these specifically for us. They really want this job, and even if you've never done it before, they're probably going to appreciate the effort. So those are a couple ways to go about that problem. I'm not saying one will definitely get you the job, because who knows, every company's different. But if you want to impress an art director, going the extra mile is always a good thing. Don't just assume, oh, well, I'm not a UI guy, so I'm not going to do this. Like, at least try it. At least try to make it work. And trust me, if they see that you're trying to do that, even if you don't get the job, they're going to respect that and they're going to remember you the next time they're hiring, because 90% of the people applying to the job aren't going to do that. They're not going to take that extra step. They're just going to write the job off as a thing that they're not suited for and move on. So, yeah. Those are some ways to stand out. Hopefully that answers the question. I would say if you really want to work at the company and they ask for UI, do the last one I mentioned and just do some UI specifically in that company's style and say right in your application, I've never done UI before, but I saw that you needed it, so I did these for you. Does this work? I'd love some feedback. Anything you can do to start a conversation with an art director like that where they're going to give you feedback and you guys are going to move forward and that kind of thing, that's all really good. You know, you want to be somebody that they're talking to, somebody that they're comfortable with, somebody that's doing the stuff they want to see. Like, that's all really good information. Really good information for them. They need to know that they can get along with you. They need to know that you can take direction. They need to know that you're willing to go outside your comfort zone. But no, yeah, like, I've done art tests for companies before that needed UI, and I don't know anything about UI, but I've done it. You know, I've tried to do it. I've been like, okay, well, I'd love to work for this company, so I might as well try it. Like, they need to see it, so I guess I'm going to do it. And I don't usually do UI. I've done icons and stuff before and symbols, but I've never done, like, you know, little 100 pixel by 100 pixel buttons and things. Until I applied to them. But no, yeah, in general, with any job stuff like that, for anyone listening who might have a similar question or who's curious or who encounters this down the line, if you actually want to work for the company and it's a company that you think you'd be a good fit at, just just go the extra mile. Just do it. Don't even ask for the art test for the icon. Just do some icons and tell them, hey, I've never done these before, but I did them with you guys in mind, and just try to impress them. Can't hurt. Everybody always wants somebody to tell them to do the extra work. They want that email from the art director that says, like, well, maybe you'll get the job if you do X, Y, and Z, because right now we're only seeing A, B, and C. And it's like, no, just do that on your own. Like, you don't need them to tell you that. You already know that. Everybody has the potential in them to go the extra mile and do that stuff, but nobody wants to, because, that's where the lazy brain kicks in. That's where the human brain kicks in, and you go, I don't want to do that. I mean, I'll do it if they tell me to, but... The other thing, I'm just going to keep ranting on this because I'm not seeing other questions, but... The other thing is that a lot of people get the wrong mentality about art tests and stuff like that, where they go, well, I don't do icons, and they're not going to hire me unless I do an icon for them, but they're not going to pay me for that icon, so fuck doing free work. Ew. But it's like... They don't know you. They've never worked with you. They don't know if you can do it. Your portfolio doesn't have it in there. Like, that's, doing an art test that isn't paid. Like, yeah, you're taking a hit. Sure, that's a bummer. But that's an investment. The same way people put money aside and don't get a return on it potentially because they're gambling on an investment. That's you investing in the opportunity to work for this company you want to work for. Like, you have to look at it from the art director's point of view. You have to understand that they have limited resources. They probably can't throw money out for an art test if they're not offering it. It's not because they're necessarily a terrible company. It's just that they don't have it in the budget. And, like, they need to hire someone who's capable, and if they don't know that you're capable, you kind of have to prove it to them. That's not them being a bad company. That's just them trying to make sure they hire the right person, because, trust me, it's going to cost them a lot more down the line if they hire you and find out that you can't handle their job requirements. Like, they need to know. So, yeah, just think of it that way. I mean, the art test is basically them handing you a basketball and telling you it's up to you. It's like, you can go try and do a slam dunk and get on the team, or you can drop the ball and go, this isn't fair. I don't want to do this. Fuck that. And it's like, okay, well, now the art director is totally not going to hire you. Like, if you're not willing to meet him halfway on that thing, then that's not a good working relationship, so there goes your chance. I know it's a bummer, but you gotta think about it from their side. There's a difference between free work and free application, and an art test is basically a free application. It's you saying, if I worked for you, my stuff would look like this. And they need to know that. They need to know that. So if they ask for it, just do it. Don't whine, don't bitch, don't ask for cash if they don't have it. Just do it. Unless you don't want to work for them, in which case, don't waste your time. But if you do, just do the art test. Just get it out of the way. Move on. I guess that I'm just afraid that by the time I'd finish the UI design or whatever, the requirement is that the position will be gone, not listed. Well, do it fast. I mean, that's the answer. Do some UI stuff, give yourself 3 days and do it. Just do it. Just get it done. You could be doing it right now instead of talking to me. It's like, just get it done. If you really want to work for this company, then just do whatever you have to do to get it done as fast as possible. That's just freelance 101. It's like, if an opportunity comes and there's a time limit, or it's time sensitive, it's up to you to just bust ass and make the proper sacrifices and get it out. Like, that's the nature of the business. That's why some people succeed in certain things and some people don't. It's because some people are willing to put in those extra hours and work that extra, mile. But, yeah, I mean, you can do some UI stuff in a couple days. You totally can. It's just a matter of if you're going to do it. Hey Dan, do you think aiming for... Oh, and then the other thing before I move on to the next question. And then if you do the AI stuff now, and the UI stuff, I mean, you know, even if the job's gone by the time you're finished, now you have it in your portfolio the next time that company's hiring. Now it's done. Now you don't have to worry about it. Maybe there's another company that starts hiring and they want to see UI. Guess what? Now you've got it in your portfolio. Like, there's no downside to doing it right now. Even if the job's gone, you have it next time they're hiring. You have it for other companies. Like, just do it. Just get it done. Because obviously, if that's the kind of stuff you're gravitating towards and it's a requirement, you're going to need to do it eventually. Hey Dan, do you think aiming for a position in art direction would take the fun out of more specific jobs that require more drawing and creating and less managing? It depends. I mean, it depends where you're art directing. There's art directors that are on teams of 3. There's art directors that are on teams of 50. There's art directors that are on teams of 300. Like if you're working at Weta, like it totally depends. I mean, there's as many different kinds of art direction positions as there are projects that need art directors. I think working on a small team as an art director would probably be incredibly fun. I also think working on a large team as an art director would probably be incredibly fun. You know, the art director on The Hobbit probably had a blast. The art director on a game like, I don't know, that new dungeon crawler with all the 2D artwork that's all side animated, like he probably had a really good time too. It's just whatever you feel is the right fit for you. It's one of those things where there's as many versions of that job as there are people ready to fill it. So, you know, find the one that's the right fit for you. I am just pushing this guy's face, probably more than I should, but I'm kind of having fun with it, so I'm going to keep going. Hopefully you see the stuff I'm doing. I've got my anatomy model on top of my desk, catching some light from outside right now. So he's kind of guiding the decisions I'm making in terms of the turning of the face and everything. I've got him set up at the exact same angle that your dude's set up at. So that's a big help. I'm going to turn my anatomy dude now and take a look at that neck. There we go. I think the head actually has to come down, or the shoulder. Actually, no, the shoulder has to come up. Yeah. Over here. Bring that shoulder up. The neck is a little too long, but I think you can probably get away with it. It's a bit of a stretch, but I think if you bring this shoulder up over here, you can pull it off. Maybe bring in some of that sky color. And then, you know, the collar of this thing, bring that over. Catch some of the light on that. But yeah. Cool. Alright. Oh, you sent the Samus piece? Cool. I'm gonna try to get to that. That's a weird thing to crit because Samus's design is already set in stone. I can kind of like crit the fundamentals on like the anatomy and stuff, but the majority of that crit is just, you know, get a picture of Samus off Google and make sure it looks like Samus. So like, I'll go for it, but there's not too much I can say about it because it is fan art. So it's, you know, the reference is already there for you. About the armor design for the half-orc dude, I'm not happy with it. Do you have some tips for more interesting character design? Yeah, I'll get into that. I'm just trying to fix the face. I'm trying to get the fundamentals out of the way before I jump into the design, because fundamentals are like the laws. Like these are the big important things. This is the cake basically, and the armor is the frosting. You want to make sure that the cake is taken care of before you start, you know, putting crazy swirls and happy birthday Derek on it and God knows what else. Because if it doesn't taste good, who cares? Alright, so that's a, yeah, face is working better now. Merge that down. Cool. So, okay. There's some other fundamental stuff to fix. I'll very quickly, I'll fix one thing and then I'll talk about the rest as I come around to it. First thing is this arm. If you look at let me explain this better. So the arm holding the axe is farther away than this arm because this arm is turned towards us. However, this arm is about 30% smaller than that, so it doesn't make any sense. So, because he's a half-orc dude, it's okay for him to have beefy arms. So I'm actually, instead of decreasing the other one, I'm going to increase this one. I'm going to bump it up a bit. Put that there, and then free transform it over into the joint, and then I'm going to paint directly over it. Okay, so I'm going to paint this out over here. And, alright, so grab that, I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to really, really force the forearm muscle in the shape of this leather thing, the same way it is over here. I'm going to try and match that, make sure it's at least as big and slightly bigger. Yeah. There we go. It's a small thing, but you know, you want it to feel balanced. You want the character to feel like it makes sense. I'm also going to drop this down a bit. So I think one thing about this character design that might be bothering you, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the big thing is that everything feels very random and kind of pasted. Like these designs, especially these gold designs that are just scribbled on here, those don't feel thought out. Those don't feel like they're part of any kind of culture. They don't feel like they're serving a purpose or telling a story. They're just kind of there to fill up space. It's sort of like, oh, well, it looked too plain with just the gray, so, you know, I put some gold on it for whatever reason. And it doesn't make sense because there's no gold anywhere else on the character, there's no writing anywhere else. The writing that is on him doesn't look like a language, it looks like it's just made up scribbles. And like it ends up hurting the design a lot more than helping it when you add that kind of stuff, because it feels like panic. That's like a panic decision, is like, oh shit, I gotta fill some space. And like people can see that. Panic translates. So going to kick this out a bit. Like it's maybe catching a little bit of breeze, so it's not just a straight line. I'm also going to pull it in up at the hip to show that it is cloth and it's not solid. Or I guess rigid would be a better word. It is solid, it's just not rigid. So a little more of a swoop going up into here. Drop the fur down a bit. And again, I had mentioned earlier, you want to make sure the fur actually looks like fur, so we've done some of that, and we're going to do more of that as we go forward. Over here, I'm going to pull it in a bit. I'm going to make the edges of it look a little more like a pelt. I'm going to pull it in over here, make it thinner. You don't want it to be the same thickness on both sides, because one of them is receding and we're looking at it from a different angle. So you definitely want it thinner over here. And you also want it curving off of the leg. You want the leg to be over it. So I'm going to do that real quick. I'm actually going to bring this up too. So real quick, I'm going to just check the drawing here. So his crotch is like right. Alright, hold on. I'm going to do a quick blue line. Just because I want to check the drawing. Okay, so head, neck. This is roughly where the nipples fall, so that's 2 heads down, that makes sense. Curves in, 3 heads down, that's roughly the navel, that makes sense. 4 heads down, crotch. Okay, so the leg needs to come up a tiny bit, or maybe not. Okay, leg coming forward, knee. That joint is what's throwing me off. You pop the knee out more than it needs to be. Alright, so that's down. There. Okay, cool. Again, not perfect anatomy, but close enough that we can focus on some other stuff. You know, anatomy is just a thing that everybody needs to work on. It's just, no one's ever a master of it, even people that look like they are. There's always something that someone isn't good at with anatomy. It's just the nature of it. So, I'm going to... Let's see. I'm going to pull the fur up a tiny bit to really hug right underneath the kneecap. I want it like right there. You know, I want the pants coming out of that. Just want the pants tight, getting pulled into it. That's really the only thing. And then widen this. So it's coming forward. Actually, hold on just a second. I knew this felt similar to something I'd seen, and now I know what it is. This feels very similar to my best bud Dave Raposa's Garen painting. It's a very, very similar pose, which is fine. This pose has been used a lot, don't worry. I'm just going to pull this up for reference on my other screen because it's very similar. It has a lot of the same issues to address. Alright, so let's look at some of the design decisions being used here. Gonna first off drop this down so it has more weight. It feels very weird just being that small. Also gonna kick this leg back to like here and get it out of here. So the body's pivoting a bit more, just to displace the weight a bit. And this is lined with fur, so I'm gonna make that edge more pelty. Cool. Alright, so the armor itself, let's start taking a look. So, the weakest point in any armor, well, not the armor, but the weakest point that you want to defend the most on any warrior, especially when they're using weapons that are being swung, is the joint. It's where the joint is. That's why over here on this reference, you see the leather is overlapping the joint to double pad it. So it's got, you know, 2 pads of leather and then probably chainmail underneath it. So it's 1, 2, 3 layers. Over here, this guy just has a shirt right here. So if he's fighting a dude and a sword or a spear goes in there, he's basically done. He's going to bleed out and die instantly. He's not going to be able to swing a weapon. So you want to armor that up. He's not wearing pauldrons of any kind, like, you know, metal pauldrons that would have like one of the round things in the front there to defend the joint. So what I'm going to do is take the shoulder pads you've designed and just make them bigger. And aside from making them bigger, I'm also going to wrap them around the front more, like in the reference. Because you need to cover that area. Leaving it empty makes it feel very, very exposed, which is not what you want when you're wearing armor. Dan, in relation to character design, how do you go about making up the anatomy of creatures and things that aren't human? Uh, all the best creature designs in the industry and elsewhere are based on the anatomy of something that actually exists. So that's the thing to keep in mind is like if it's a lizard man, combine the actual anatomy of lizards and men. That's the best way to solve that problem. Look for creative solutions based in actual animals that exist in nature because when you're making up a creature, nature's done the hard work for you. There's millions and millions of species of almost every kind of thing you can think of out there that are way cooler than half the stuff you're gonna try and make up, especially when it comes to like bone structure and stuff. Like most people aren't technically like adept enough to really think about that, and the look of something really is a layering. You only see the surface, but the reason that a monitor lizard looks the way it does has to do with the bones, has to do with how the muscles wrap the bones, has to do with the environment that it's in. All those things are factors that end up in that final look of how that thing is, and most people don't take that into account when they're just trying to design cool creature. It's like, oh, cool creature, whatever. Like it's cool and that's enough, and like maybe that is enough. Maybe that's fine for you, and that's okay. I'm not judging that, but if you want to make a creature that's functional, that actually works and is believable and looks really cool, you want to look at how other kinds of animals besides people work and start pulling those elements into it. Think about the environment it lives in. Think about the adaptations it would have to survive there. How did it become this thing it became? Those are the kinds of things that are going to make it stand out. A really good example of this is some of the creatures in Mass Effect, even though a lot of them have the fatal flaw of a human with a whatever face. But some of them are really cool. The Krogan are really cool. They make sense, even though they're just, big humans with frog faces, basically. But you can tell that a lot of thought went into the choices of why their faces look the way they do, why other creatures look the way they do. That stuff makes sense to me. It's the reason why the Smog design in The Hobbit was so good, is because they based it off, number one, a bat, because it's walking with its wings. Number two, they based it off of, like, a great, like, horned lizard. And that looks really cool. That makes a lot of sense. All those features are in there. Like, they really, really pulled together the best elements of the most fitting animals for that creature design, and that's why it looks so much more convincing than just, here's my fantasy dragon. It's cool because it's a dragon. Like, when you plan it and you think about it and you pull real, believable, natural features in, that's when you start getting creature designs that really, really look like they could exist. That's like, I don't know, everyone's going to hate me for saying this, but I'm just being honest. Like, when I saw Pacific Rim, I was really impressed with some of the robots. I was not impressed with any of the kaiju, the monsters. They all looked kind of the same to me. They didn't look like they were something that would actually exist anywhere. They didn't look like animals that came from like a world that made sense. They just looked like, here's a really cool monster face that all kind of look the same, and then a body attached to it, but the bodies didn't have different kinds of texture, they didn't have different kinds of scale. There wasn't like hairy ones or weird ones or ones that weren't like bipedal or like, they all just looked like concept art monster number 200. Concept art monster number 205. Like, as opposed to, like, and again, this is the thing where how well you render something is less important than the idea itself. The old Godzilla monsters, as shitty as they are, and as like, it's a guy in a plastic suit, the idea behind those monsters were so much cooler than anything I saw in Pacific Rim, because, some of them were like beetles, and some of them were like, based on like pterodactyls, and they made sense, and some of them, one was a moth, and it's like, at least that stuff makes sense. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Avatar did it pretty well. There was a couple things in Avatar that jumped out as like, oh, that doesn't really make sense. Like the big panther that has like frog skin. It's like a big panther thing with 4 legs, but it's got like slick, oily skin, and it's like, how did that evolve? Like, what? That makes no sense. It's like a mammal, but it's got like amphibian skin. What? But then there was like, you know, all the cool glowy stuff, and that made sense, and all the small animals and all the plants made a lot of sense. The Venus flytrap things that can shrink, and a lot of thought and care and research of actual plants and animals went into that movie, and it shows. But yeah, I hope that makes sense. That's why I love my main man, my baddest boy, Brent Hollowell, because that man knows how to make some monsters that look and feel like they could actually exist. Big shout out to B-Boy Brent. Love you. It's also why I love Nate Hallinan. If anyone knows Nate Hallinan. My favorite thing Nate's ever... I mean, I love a lot of stuff Nate's painted, but my favorite thing he's ever painted was a Smurf. He did a... What would a Smurf be if it was real? And he came up with this incredibly creative, believable design where it's like a bipedal version of like a dormouse, basically. And like the hat on its head is like this fungus thing that's growing out of it, and it's very clear that it's inspired by mushrooms, but it feels like it's a mammalian thing coexisting with that, and like everything feels real and believable. So let's see. I gotta bring this one over to bring this down. Question in the chat. So even if I'm trying to design something sci-fi or fantastic, I should look for real-world equivalent like lizards or dragons, real military suits, sci-fi suits, and so on. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if you're trying to make something that exists in an environment, reinforce it with how you know things that live in those actual environments, you know, develop. Like, look for... How do I say this that makes sense? If you design a creature that lives in a desert environment, and it's a big lizard thing that lives in a desert, and you've done your drawing and you know what it looks like, great, that's your design. When you move to the next step of the design and you're going to render it out, go look at that type of animal or types of animals that live in that actual climate and reinforce the decisions you've already made in your creation with that supplemental information. You know, why do the scales look different on lizards that survive in deserts versus lizards that live underwater? You know, why do the horns look different? Why do the colors look different? Why are the eyes smaller? You know, little things you never think of, like, oh, you know, there's sandstorms, so they've developed a giant ridge over the eye that can block the wind. So when something blows into them, you know, their eyes don't get hurt. Like, that doesn't happen underwater because they don't need it underwater. They do need it in a desert, so that's something where the creature suddenly feels like it belongs in that environment because the little tiny subtle adaptations, subconsciously, we recognize them and we go, oh, right, that looks like desert creature. That looks like underwater creature. That looks like forest animal. Because we recognize those features on the actual animals. Even if it's subconscious, we recognize them and we associate them. So you can use them to make other things feel like they belong in their environment a bit more. And stuff like using military suits to make sci-fi suits, go crazy. Like I don't care about that. Like sci-fi, future, whatever. Like as long as it's functional, who cares? Like even if it's not functional, as long as it's believable, who cares? Like the coolest sci-fi suit design I've seen in a really long time were the helmets in Prometheus, because I felt like I'd never seen anything like them before. Like, yeah, they had the glass ball and everything, and it felt like, you know, astronauts have that, so that was a recognizable element. But the inside lighting, the heads-up display, the way they connected to the suit, the color palette, like, that all felt really original. that felt like, oh, okay, this isn't just generic sci-fi costume. You know, this is a little more creative. Stuff like, you know, Mobius's sci-fi stuff, that's all crazy original. You can go totally nuts, but his stuff is believable because he's developed an entire world of visual language over the course of his career where everything exists in this kind of universe he's built. You know, he can do that because everything feels like it's a culture. It's the culture of Mobius. Like, it feels like it's a real place. All the subtle stuff reinforces it. But that's when you cross the line into sci-fi concept art and into world building. World building is very different than concept art. Concept art is a part of world building. It's a necessary step in that process, but the decisions you make are very different. You're making something potentially that's entirely new and hasn't been seen before. So maybe you don't want to base it in things that actually exist, or maybe you do. You know, that's where things start to get kind of up to the individual. But Mobius was very much a world builder, less so than a concept artist or an illustrator. Everything was very cohesive, and every project he worked on still fit into this, you know, style and this place that he was kind of making. And that's why he is what he is, you know? The sci-fi suits in the original Star Wars concept art that Ralph McQuarrie did weren't practical at all. They weren't really based on, you know, Darth Vader kind of had like a samurai feel because George Lucas said, you know, I want them to feel like swordsmen in space. So, yeah, you know, he pulled some medieval Japan and medieval Europe influences into the design, but, you know, Luke wearing in the original concept art, wearing like an oxygen mask with tubes hanging off of it, plugging into his back. Like, that's not a practical sci-fi design. Astronauts never wore anything like that. Like, that probably wouldn't work in reality, but it looked damn cool. And the way that everything else was being built in that universe, the way everything looked like kind of repurposed junkyard scrap for sci-fi, which was kind of the whole aesthetic of the entire project, that made sense in that world. You know, when he was building that world, that decision made sense because that's the way everything looked. Even the big Imperial ships were chunky. You know, they had little bits and stuff hanging off of them everywhere. Like, everything felt like repurposed junk. And that was what made it cool. So, yeah. You can make all kinds of crazy decisions when you're building your own universe. Alright, I should probably start looking at the actual armor design. I fixed the shoulders. They're bigger. Okay, so okay, so the big thing that's bothering me, and maybe what's bothering you, is that everything feels very plain. Here's the, you know, suit, kind of tile suit, the scale mill. You know, there's it's like everything's like a flat color that's rounded. There's nothing attached to anything. There's no real like layering going on the individual elements. There's no materials. Like, this is clearly leather, but it doesn't feel like leather. There's nothing sewn into it. So that's where I think the boringness is kind of coming from. It feels like just kind of paint bucketed colors on a drawing. There's no like, yeah, there's no little stimuli going on with any of the stuff. So I'm going to try and work on that. Yeah, exactly, no pouches. Marjorie's got the idea. I just got the Wayne Reynolds book. He's the guy that does all the main art for Pathfinder. He used to do, I think he still does, tons of stuff for D&D. He's the shit. He understands fantasy design. You know, he doesn't render as technically well as whoever, but like, who the fuck cares? Like, that's that thing where everyone wants to render better than everybody else now, but his designs and his ideas are way leagues better than so many other people working in that same genre. And like, the idea is what makes it cool. Alright, so first off, belt. Gonna get some other metals in here, some copper. And again, I've got my ref up on the other thing, so you can probably watch me every step of the way here and kind of understand where I'm coming from. Every decision I'm going to make on this dude is going to be from the point of view of Mongolian. So studded leather, lots of little precious things, little carved bits, little embellishments here and there because, you know, they raided, they stole, they were very wealthy, they were very eclectic. They had little things that kind of came from all over the place in their raiding grounds because it was, you know, pretty much a big empire of places that they conquered and they could appropriate from. So lots of different influences and the stuff that's on them. But yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the audio's working, Wretched. You're the only one who's complaining. Even though you probably can't hear me say this because your audio's not working. So I don't know what this symbol is on the belt. I'm going to get rid of it. It looks like it might be an anvil, but it's bright red and it's distracting. And it doesn't fit the culture of the rest of the costume, so I'm going to nix it. I'll keep this kind of belt buckle, but I'm going to change some stuff on it. I'm going to make the inside of it copper. So, copper. Let's see here. Unify the top of it. Grab some. It's unclear what this is. I'm going to say that it's a leather girdle that's kind of... I'm just trying to figure out the planes of like what is on top of what right now. So this is like a leather girdle that's over the furry thing. So that's on this layer. And then underneath that is a cast shadow from it, but that's really, it's a really deep cast shadow, so I'm going to lighten that a bit. Okay. Yeah, because making this shadow this deep felt like his leg was receding way, way in. And it really isn't, because, you know, it's right there. So I'm going to have to redraw that leg towards the end. It just has to be done. You guys can hear me, right? So this big area of squares feels really normal and really uninterrupted. So opposites in concept art are probably the most powerful tool. If there's tons of straight lines, the best way to create visual interest is with a curved line. If there's tons of parallel lines, a diagonal that cuts through them is the best way to activate them. That's just like 101 opposites. Like, you know, that's why complementary colors are complementary. That's why white shows up against black. You know, it's just, that's like basic art rule number one is use opposites to your advantage whenever you can. So this is looking very normal to me. It's looking very repetitive. It makes sense because I know what kind of armor you're looking at. That armor did exist, but you're making a character here that's in a piece of concept art, and you're not making, you know, reality study number 500. So let's do something. Let's just steal from the reference a bit because I know that this culture had these a lot in varying sizes and placements. And let's put a plate right on there, right underneath the collar line. Let's just draw it in real quick and make sure it fits. Okay. And then let's light it up accordingly with the light source. I'm gonna make it copper because everything else is gray, and I want to get some more color in there. I want to get some more interest in there. I want to make the armor look cooler. Let's light up this rim over here. I'm gonna very quickly rough in a design. So let's get this rim. Let's apply a secondary rim. And then this is Mongolia, so there's a couple things you could use. You could either do a symbol, or you could do a tiger, or you could do a dragon. You could do a bird. Let's think. Let's think. Okay, I'm just gonna really quick look at some stuff. Alright. The obvious thing would be to put a face on it. I might not do that, just because I feel like the focal point's up here, and this is more of an illustration, less of a piece of concept art, so I'm just going to do a very basic Eastern kind of thing. Okay. I'll bring these in the middle, and 2 lines there. Okay, zoom out. Again, apologies in advance. This is a paint over, so I'm just gonna get some basic stuff in, but I'm not gonna finish the piece. I just want to imply the things that need to be implied, tighten the things that might need tightening, move on from there. I need to rotate this, but I'll do that after I'm done painting it. So okay. Sorry, getting quiet. Getting into the render zone. Apologize. If anyone has any questions or stuff they'd like me to talk about, put it in the chat. I will see it. Just trying to get enough highlights in here that it feels like copper. Alright. Okay. Zoom out. Just going to do a quick on-off before I go forward here. Cool. So I have some tips for the material definition, material studies. Well, yeah, I mean, the obvious answer is to do material studies, yeah. I mean, you should, even if you're not studying standalone studies, like just, doing a study to do a study, at least try to study into the piece. Like, try that. Like, look at leather while you're rendering the leather. Look at how armor works on a gauntlet as you're rendering the gauntlet. Like, really try to study into the piece and, get that information in there when you're actually in the painting part of the piece. But if you have time to do standalone studies, do those too, just so you start to learn what leather looks like. Like, so if the light's hitting the leather the way it is right now, Leather's not particularly colorful unless it's painted. It can be very warm, but it's pretty much all, you know, umber to sienna, pretty much. But so the way the light's hitting it, it's going to be curved. So the light's going to bend. It's going to be very dark. Then it's going to have a slight strip because leather reflects light in a very similar way to some kinds of dull metal. Not shiny metal, just dull metal, like, you know, a sheet of tin or something like that. So the shadows are going to come up pretty much to where the light's hitting it. Then there's going to be a brief area of mid-value, and then very desaturated and catching the pores, because keep in mind what leather is. It's skin of an animal, so it's got pores. That's where the texture of leather comes from. There's going to be a band of, you know, kind of divoted light that's catching in those little cracks. You can imply it pretty easily, but yeah. I'm downplaying the light a bit because this is it looks like it's leaning towards a sunset scenario. Obviously, if you look at the reference next to the painting, when it's very, very bright light and it's outside, you know, see the metal of the helmet? It's reflecting light almost the same way as the shoulder pads, which are made out of leather. So that's what I mean by this dull metal up here. It's the same kind of thing. You can see from the shield that the metal on this guy isn't particularly polished or shiny. It's not chromed. So it's like, you know, it's reflecting light very much the same way. Obviously, the speculars on metal are always going to be brighter, but get a little more of this color in here. Talk about motivation and hard work. Be motivated and work hard. Those are my tips. I know that's extremely insightful. You're welcome. So I'm going to repeat the shape that's on the breastplate on the gauntlets. Let's do some shape repetition. Obviously they're in shadow, so they're not going to be catching too much light. A little bit reflected off the ground, though. Yeah, I know. Isn't that the best advice I've ever given, Marjorie? My advice on motivation and hard work. Work hard and stay motivated. Dan Warren, 2014. Copyright. Trademark. I'm going to kind of repeat the metal banding that's around these shoulder pads on the arm. So I'm going to bring this down here around the edge. Maybe there's some either painted on or probably a metal exo kind of skeleton for the shape of the gauntlet. They usually laid the leather over metal anyway to make it more protective, so maybe some metal's poking out here. I just want to repeat that. Same thing at the top of it. Actually, do I want to do that? Yeah, sure. I'll pull this gauntlet out a bit like this. Again, sorry if it's really noisy here. I live on the ocean, and everybody's putting their boats in the water, so it's been a noisy couple of weeks. I'm going to assume that the shoulder pads are leather, so they feel like they're leather because of the way they're wrapped and because of the culture this guy's from. So I'm going to change the color on them a bit to reflect that, so they match the gauntlets. I'm going to bring some metal back on top of them, but that comes after. I just want to make the gauntlets not the only, you know, really, really leathery part on here. So again, bring in the banding. This. So again, this is a design critique, so it's going to go long. They always do, because I get carried away. So enjoy that. So let's see, I'm going to repeat the shape, because these are curved, so I'm going to repeat the shape of the squares that are in here because that geometric pattern doesn't really come back anywhere. I'm going to repeat that on the shoulder pads by making metal wraps that go over the center, and then the side studs that do that. So in the same way the metal plating on the reference is there, it's the same thing. I'm just making it more rectangular to match the shirt. This is where I start, you know, taking the ideas that are in the reference and tweaking them so it's not an exact copy of Mongolian armor. I'm thinking that, you know, the ones in the chest here are actually better suited for the shoulder pads, so that's what I'm going to go with. Again, this is just me making that decision. Doesn't mean it has to be that way. This is just how I would do this if it was my piece. So I'm going to rough these in, imply that there's some carving in there. You know, get some studs. Band the metal so it's turning away. Another thing you'll notice if you look closely at the study, at the reference over here I'm studying from, is the studs in the armor are actually, you know, because this is leather that's pretty much laid over metal, you need more than one nail to hold it down, because otherwise it'll just, you know, flap off and flail around. So I'm going to take that into consideration and run some studs along the bottom here. Cool. The other thing that's bothering me, let's take a look here. I'll get to that in a minute. There is one element in the piece that isn't being repeated that's bothering me. It's the fur. So I'm gonna take care of that in just a minute. I'm gonna lay it underneath the leather as a sort of extra layer of padding, I think. So again, are you in here? I'm sorry, I'm bad with memory. Person who painted this? I know it's a V name. That's all I remember. Vithor, right, that's the one. Is any of this making sense? The stuff I'm doing? I just want to make sure that this is sticking as I go forward here. Okay, cool. Good. Hopefully other people can get something out of this too. Again, I say this every time, but in case it's someone's first time listening to this, when I do these paintovers for art camp, I'm not going to have time to get to every single piece in the paintover thread probably, because there's a lot and it's just me doing them. So I try to pick pieces that the most people can learn from each time. I look for stuff that has a lot of stuff that a lot of people are struggling with, and this one had a lot of design stuff, some anatomy stuff, some portrait stuff with how to make the face read better at the angle it was at, some lighting things, some compositional stuff, and I said, okay, well that's a pretty big checklist of things that, you know, more people seem to have problems with. So even if I don't pick your piece, trust me, I looked at it and I made a judgment call that the problems in this are the same problems you might be having. So try to pay attention, hopefully learn from what I'm doing to this and apply it to your own. With any luck, you know, maybe I will get to look at your stuff as I go forward. But I'm not going to get to everybody, unfortunately. But keep submitting, because who knows? You might submit something that's incredibly beneficial to a large number of people when it gets talked about. So by all means, please keep submitting on the paintover thread. Even though, you know, there's a lot there. There's plenty more things to talk about, and I'd love to see what you're doing. So, yep. So, like, I'll come back to this one later tonight, but this was the other paintover I was doing the other day when my live stream crashed, and as you can see, this is a very basic, almost a color sketch of what they were going for, and I started doing this. It's not done yet, but this was very simple, and I'm trying to show them how to finish, and this one was very complex, and I'm trying to show, like, okay, well, even though there's more work done on this, the design's been neglected, let's talk about that. So I'm trying to pick different kinds of paintovers to do. So hopefully these help various people and not just the person getting the paintover. Okay. Gonna bring back the gold, or the copper rather, my bad. On here, here, and the third one. Yeah, the third one. Okay. Catch in. Catch in. Apply some carving. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Gonna push this edge a bit. Just because it's bothering me. Okay. Alright, so the next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna play with something here. Grab this. Yeah. So underneath the gauntlet here, I'm gonna have some of that pelt sticking out to soften the transition and to add an extra layer of padding underneath the metal. I'm gonna do the same over here, because right now the pelt is only in one place on the character and it feels a little random. Feels a little imbalanced. It's on that boot on the bottom too, but it's barely in the composition, so I'm gonna bring it back up here. One thing, is there a reason you chose like a flat top mohawk for the haircut? It feels very random for this guy in this culture. But yeah, I'd love to know the design decision behind the flat top mohawk. If there is a reason for it before I critique it. I don't know what to tell you, man. Sorry, someone in the chat can't hear me for some reason, but everybody else can, so I don't know what's going on with their computer. I don't know. Can't help you. Can't hear me say this anyway, so it's fine. still waiting on an answer for the flat top if you have one, Tim. Let's see here. Okay. Might change that, but yeah. Getting quiet again. Getting quiet again. Okay. So, again, with repeating shapes, looking at the shoulder pads, looking at this thing, and then looking over at actual Mongolian stuff, I'm going to, this feels like it's cloth, I'm going to sew some leather into the cloth, and then I'm going to stud it for extra defense, just to make this feel like it belongs on this costume. So originally there were like very random, like Warcrafty magic spell designs just on this for no real reason. I'm gonna try and take elements of the costume to decorate this, which is the leather and the metal, so it's gonna feel a bit more unified than it did before. No, I'm not gonna do that. Okay. Alright. I'm gonna stud this leather. Whoops. So, square metal plate, rectangle metal plate, square metal plate. Sorry guys, live stream weirdness. Live stream's being very weird again. Can you guys still hear me? I don't know if the chat's in real time anymore because it's being laggy and weird. Okay. Weird. Very weird. I don't know what's going on, Richard. I'm sorry. All right. So I'm just curious. We've got like 18 people in here. For those of you that are watching and listening and thinking about your own work, do these crits, when I crit other people in depth like this, do these help you with your own pieces? Does this make sense? Is this something you listen back to? I'm just curious. I'm always looking for new ways to do these and ways to improve doing the paintovers, so feel free to weigh in. I would love to hear if it's actually helping the way I hope it's helping. I know when I watch paintovers of other people's work, it helps me a lot. I just don't, everybody's different, so I'm curious. Okay. So in case anyone is curious about armor design stuff, so I'm a huge nerd. The reason banding Mongolians have banding and other people chose banded armor like this is because of flexibility. If you think of the way scales work and how it allows a snake to curve in any which direction, little repeated bands of plating like that, or like an armadillo, like if you look at the shoulder pad, if you look at the banding down here, like that allows maximum flexibility. And for people that are on horseback that are going to be doing very, very, athletic combat where they're going to be turning every which way, and they need to shoot a bow and arrow and 360 degrees as fast as possible, but they still want to be protected. That's a lot more optimal than something like plate mail or something like that. That's very heavy, very restrictive. There's only a couple directions you can move in. Like, that's why they chose this. It's basically armadillo armor. There's even species of armadillo that have this like checkered plating. Cool. Cool, thanks. Let me know if my voice creeps into your subconscious, some guy. That'd be good. That'd be good. I hope that happens. Tim Vither. The chat lagged out for a few, and I don't know if you answered this question, but on this character, he's got like a flat top mohawk. Is there a reason you chose that haircut? Just because I feel like it's a little random for him. It's more like Native American than Eastern European / Asian. I just wanted to know before I potentially change it. I want to know what the thought process was for that. Oh, because it looks cool. Gotcha. Valid reason. I don't know if it necessarily works with the culture you're going for, but I'm going to play with it and see if I can come up with something. I might just extend it, but... Might do that. So, let's see here. I'm going to give him this weird braid. This weird, like, ponytail braid thing. Just because it's not going to be a braid, it's going to be literally a ponytail. Because he's from, like, a horse culture, and it feels like a horse thing. And it's just something that's going to let me play with the mohawk a bit and make it less of a mohawk. I'm literally thinking of his hair now the way horse's hair is. So, long on the top, not really any on the sides. And again, if this is something you hate, don't use it. If it's something you like, good. but this is what I would do with this character. Catch some highlights in his hair. Cool. And it nicely kind of pulls the eye through the design. Ponytails are a fun trick. So again, these bands down here, I'm very quickly gonna stud these because I forgot to. And then, you know, the silhouette of the studs on the far side. A little more reflected light. Cool. Gonna catch a little more light over here because some of these are just disappearing completely. Okay. About the background, do you think it's too simple? It was my intention to not distract from the character. Do you think that there's a better solution? You could render it out more. Imply that it looks like a, you know, bit more of a desert. Get a bit more variation in there. Maybe gradiate the sky towards a cool color because it's kind of sunset as you get higher. But I think keeping the background simple is the right approach. I wouldn't put too much more work into it than you already have. You could just make it, you know, a little clearer that it's a desert and that these are either rocky hills back here or sand dunes. I'm not sure which, but yeah, you could definitely imply it a bit more if you want to. But yeah, could stand a little more work. I'm gonna lose a bit more of that mountain line, just because it is so far in the background. And it's a bit too crisp right now for making this guy pop. I'm going to duplicate your background and flatten all the things I've done so far. So this is, right now, this is the before and after. Get in here for people on demand. Cool. Keep in mind that the live stream is significantly less quality than the image because it's streaming in low definition because of the insane amount of RAM it takes to stream in high definition. So you might not be able to see certain details or things in the background the way that they actually look. That's why I post these to the forum afterwards, so you can actually see the paint over next to the actual piece and get a sense for what it really looks like. Because I know the video is fuzzy. It's just a unfortunate thing about live stream. Over here on this gauntlet, I'm gonna get rid of these like shoestring, for lack of a better word. It looks like he has a football on his arm, for lack of a better word. It just looks like a football. And you got those big shoestrings going through brown leather. I'm gonna get rid of that. Gonna imply that it's extended down a bit more on the other side. Oops. Okay. Instead, I'm going to show some ties because this is the underside. So, I'm going to have it open. And I'm going to have, let's see, I'm going to show the fur coming up a bit, but not all the way. See here. Alright, and then I'll show some of the red of the sleeve after that, and then some of the green from the hand up here. about where the shirt's going to end. And then I'm going to take some this and just do very basic tie. Just something that feels like it's actually made with the materials these guys would have on hand. I'm going to take this metal bracing we talked about before. I'm going to run it underneath those stitches to show that this is the edge of the leather. Because remember, we put a metal frame under the leather that's over it. So if it's wrapped, that's going to be the edge of it. And it's facing the light, so it's going to catch a little light. I'm going to do that, but then erase the section out where it's tied. There we go. And then run the metal frame down the outside. Get this pelt looking. Alright, cool. These things that are tied around, I'm, let's see. Actually just going to turn those into metal torques, I think, which is like a ring. They're usually Celtic, but I'm sure they had them in other cultures. They're very simple. So I'm going to get rid of these strings that no longer make sense and just have those be metal bands that are around. Gonna lighten the value in the hair here to pop that arm forward where it touches here. Alright. Cool. I'm gonna lose this edge too, just because it shouldn't be as defined as it is. Because the hair is moving and it's behind him. Okay. Crisp this contour up. I'm going to get rid of these laces over here now. Bring this value out to make it feel more like it's metal, so it's just catching light where the light's going to band. Okay. We wouldn't see the studs on the other side of the gauntlet, so I don't have to worry about that. We would see the muscle a bit more defined in this hand, though. So I'm going to do that real quick. I'm just holding my hand up in front of my monitor and painting from that. Okay. And based on where the lighting is now, I feel like this cast shadow would actually be knocked back pretty significantly because the sun is in front of us, which means that we're going to see a lot more of in front of him, which means we're going to see a lot more of this haft than we are right now. So I'm going to kick it back to, because the head is what's casting a shadow on it, so I got to keep in mind the placement of the light source and the placement of the shadow based on the object casting it, which is the head. So you've implied that the handle is metal and it's wrapped, so I'm going to show some of the metal wrapped under it so it's not totally wrapped. So it's got a bit more showing through, so it feels more crudely taped. Let's see. Gonna mess up the edge of this so it feels more like animal pelt, animal fur. Okay, now I'm gonna go grab a reference real quick. looking at a Mongolian battle axe. Alright. So this axe head just doesn't feel right to me. I've been struggling with it since we started, but I'm just gonna go for a more traditional one. It's just too weird. And again, if you disagree with this, that is okay. I'm just doing a paint over based on how I would treat this. I'm going to give it a little wear and tear, just because fantasy. There you go. 2 chips, and it's officially seen some action. That's all you need. I'm also going to add this down here, the back end of the axe, which is going to be in a pick shape for puncturing armor. The broadside of an axe would probably glance right off armor because it's a broad blade and not a point. A lot of Mongolian axes have a pick side, where the back end of the axe is a puncture thing like this. That's because if they encounter people with like plate armor or heavy armor, that side of the axe, because it's a fixed point and all the weight of the swing is directed down into that point, that's the only thing that's going to get through a plate of metal. So it's like 2 weapons in one, basically. So I'm gonna add that in for when they need to basically blast through a dude's helmet, or you know, stab somebody in the heart through an inch of steel. But not an inch, but you get the idea. Cut through some chainmail. This is the side that would do that, because all the force of his weight, the horse's speed, gets fixed into this one tiny point that just punctures right through. That's why that's there. Gonna round off the top of this. Again, I'm referencing actual weaponry right now. Just looking for the design aesthetic that they used. Trying to pull that into this. Okay. Anybody have any questions or stuff they'd like me to talk about? I'm getting ready to wrap this one up, so I'll be on briefly after this for a second one to wrap up a paint over I started the other day, but yeah. After that, I will be off and away. Of course, you could inlay this axe with all kinds of designs and stuff because it is oriental. But for the sake of time and my sanity, I'm not going to do that. But you totally could because that's the culture and it makes sense. So. I don't know why that was bothering me, but it was. This belt in the middle. I'm just gonna bullshit some scribbles to imply there's a carving design on it. Because it's not just going to be a broad-faced copper plate. It's going to have some kind of symbol. There you go. Okay. Again, I have to go. I'll check the beginning and the end of the video tomorrow, but I'm really grateful the changes certainly apply once it's mentioned soon. The notes about culture, cohesion, pattern, repetition, so useful. Cool. Glad it helped. Thanks for coming. Good to have you. It's always good to have the people that did the painting in the stream when they get the paint over. So yeah, thanks for coming. Glad it helped. Okay. Yes, I do commission work, Ghost Pilot. I do. I take on any and all commissions, usually. What are your favorite non-textbook books on history that will give concept artists an accurate understanding of a single culture's tools, armor, fashion, etc.? I can't really give you that. I have so many books. It's crazy. They're all really helpful. There was a series of books that I was fascinated with when I was a kid that I have most of, not all of them, called the Eyewitness series. It was a series of visual references that like every school library had, where it was just, the title would be like insect, and it would just be tons of photos of insects, like really good photos, with descriptions and explanations and scientific facts. There were some that were called like India, and it was like history, modern day architecture. There were some that were called like costume, military, that explained why things looked the way they did. There was one called like, I have a bunch. I've got like Aztec, Egypt, like Rome. Those are all really good ones. Armor is a good one. Castle is another good one. It explains why things look the way they do. Weapon is a good one. It shows like a visual history of different kinds of weapons and what they do and why they were invented. And because it's like, the obvious answer is, weapons were invented to kill people. armor was invented to defend people, but it's the specifics of how each kind goes about doing that that's fascinating. So it's not enough to just like, oh, it's a weapon, it kills, whatever. It's like certain things do certain things, and there's a reason that they existed. Like, I didn't know that the Romans had flamethrowers till I read those books as a kid, and I was like fascinated with the idea that, you know, Roman ships would have cannons that shot flaming oil onto other ships and would burn them down at sea, and like all this crazy shit that I never would have thought about. But yeah, I'd say if you can find those, I don't think they're in print anymore, but it was a series of books called Eyewitness. I probably learned more from those than anything. Like understanding culture wise and why things are the way they are. Those books were amazing. I don't know if they're in print. You might be able to find them on Amazon, but I don't know if they're still in print. Yeah, there's a lot of them on Amazon actually. Yeah, it's the DK Eyewitness books: World War II, Ocean, Earth, Animal, Robot, Dinosaur, Indian, American Revolution, Train, Viking. Viking's a good one. I have that one. Space, Ancient Rome. These books are fucking amazing. So like, you know, oh cool, nice. That's a cool torrent. I have most of these actually. This is hilarious. Yeah, this is cool. So there you go. Yeah, I want to say I've got 22 of them. It looks like there's 44 total, so I've got like half the collection. But yeah, that's cool. It's cool that they're online in PDF form. I didn't think they would be because they're old. Like they were in the library when I was like 6. Like those, they must have been reprinted or something, or maybe these are newer editions of the same book that have been updated because those were around forever ago. It's just a friend of mine was cleaning out his attic and he happened to have them, and thank God he gave them to me. He was like, "Oh yeah, I found a bunch of books, and you collect books. Do you want books?" And I was like, "I want books." And then I got books. That's my story. So yeah, I'm getting ready to wrap this up. I think there's more I could do, but I've done so much that I feel like it's enough to take this piece in a new direction. So that's the point of a paint over, is to show you the next step, and yeah, what you could do to improve it. I'm gonna do a couple quick things, and then I'm gonna get off of here. Um, One quick thing I'm gonna try. I might not keep it, but we'll see. Going to imply that there's some edge work in these plates because they just feel so plain to me. I'm just gonna scribble them in real quick. They just feel really plain and just like blocks. I know the armor you're rendering, I've seen it before, but I don't know. It doesn't, it just feels kind of bland for some reason. scribble that in. Okay. Yeah. I'm just rendering in little studs, just little implied edges here and there. Cool. Yeah, I'm going to keep that. I think it makes it look a little more handcrafted. Cool. $163 books total. That's crazy. I believe it though. There were tons of them in the library when I was a kid. Tons of them, tons of them. Yeah, I'm definitely detail oriented. This is a paint over someone else's work, but I am slave to them details. Let's see. Okay. Okay. I've done quite a bit. One quick thing in here. There's no pattern. This is very clearly, you know, an end band of a piece of cloth, and there's no pattern, so I'm just going to rough in a quick diamond thing. Just because you're never going to see someone from this culture that has, you know, a hem on a dress like this, or whatever you want to call this, that doesn't have something, even if it's not much. So I'm going to very quickly rough that in. It just feels too plain otherwise. It doesn't sit. Yeah, there you go. Cool. And the way this is catching light, it looks like it's rolling into the shadow. That doesn't make sense. It's going to be flat, facing forward. So, defined edge, and then it can roll away over here. Yeah. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, this was a fun paint over. I like design stuff. Obviously, that's kind of my thing. So it's fun to crit these. Talk about culture. Talk about why things are the way they are, how things evolve. It's yeah, I love that stuff. So thank you for submitting this. It's been quite a bit of fun. Things to watch out for going into finish. Obviously, I fixed some things. I didn't have time to finish absolutely everything because then I'd be finishing painting for you. Watch out for hands. Obviously, that's a big thing. This one still feels pretty stiff. This one down here, that forefinger is just way too big. It's just feeling wonky. That thumb is too small in relation to it. You know, you want to watch out for that stuff. The thumb should be coming up and kind of buckling over like that, because you know the thumb is pretty big and pretty meaty. So you want to keep that in mind, especially if the forefinger is going to be that big. yeah, you know, show the forms of the finger, the wrinkles for sure. Imply some, you know, wear and tear. Maybe he's got hairy knuckles or whatever. Other things to watch out for. Basically, you know, you're drawing your proportions pretty well. We changed a couple things. Your proportions are looking decent though overall. You want to watch out for planes next. That's the next step. So, like I did with the face, real quick, I'll zoom up here and look at it. Like the few things I did to the face, it's like, you know, you want to watch out for how the face actually descends in space. You want to watch out for planes of what catches light, that kind of thing. Just keep an eye on that. But yeah, so anything else? Let's see. Oh, okay. Just let's see. That might be it. I guess that's it for now. I'll zoom out and see if I need to do a light pass on anything. Then I'll try it. Drop my opacity down a bit. Oh, sorry, I haven't been looking at the chat. Non-picture based history books? I mean, I've read a ton, but not off the top of my head, no. Just anthropology books in general. Go to the library and look at those. There's some really good ones. Let's see. Alright. So real quick, I'm going to do a light pass for what's going to be catching light versus what's not going to be catching light, with just white on an overlay layer to really pull out some certain things and push back some other things. And banding on this arm is probably going to catch some light. Not so much on the leather, so I'll knock that back. I'll light the axe up a bit more. Down here, no, it's not important. It's not focal. Over here probably. Yeah, that helps. Here, here. Up the arm. Here on the haft. Some bounce light over on these plates would be helpful. Do that. On here. Down the forearm. Yeah. Okay. In the face, let's see. Pop that nose more. The brow right here. This Cro-Magnon skull, pop that. And this wedge over here, catch some light. Bottom of this, top of the lip. Top of this ridge. Ear. Wrapped around the eye. Up here. Over here. Speculars in the eyes. Down here on the neck. Shirt. These things. Side of the nose. Okay. And for shadow. We grab a dim blue. Yeah. Here. Sculpt this out a little bit more. Sink the lip back. Ears. Shadow side of the neck. Again with the skull here. Push that in. This ridge. Ear. Hair. I'm just trying to make it a little more intense. Yeah, definitely. Okay. I'm using an overlay layer set to white. When you have an overlay layer and you set it to white, it basically just boosts the value of the color that you're painting over, so it's really good for laying in light. And then I usually use a multiply, but there's a lot of darks in this painting as it is, so I'm going to stick to my overlay. I'm grabbing a dim blue for the shadows just because the background's kind of a weird off, kind of orangey, yellowy skin paste, so I'm going opposite side of the spectrum with a blue just to pull some shadows out because it's, you know, slightly complementary. It's going to add more color to the palette of the piece, and yeah, it should work. Let's see here. Shadow, 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 shadow. So I'm going to darken this down here just to force the eye up to where the focal point is by sinking that out and turning it more into a silhouette. Same with the edges over here. Same with this, because this knee is not really important. It's the face that's important, so I'm going to push back the amount of light that this is catching down here just to really make this the lit up area. It's cool how much you can do with a quick light pass. It's always fun. Okay, I'm going to try one last thing. I'm going to grab the soft. Too much. No, I guess it doesn't need it. I'm just trying to make sure it's got enough oomph. I've been wanting to redesign the armor for a design I'm working on. Yeah, it's always good to take a look at that armor. Make sure it's interesting. Nothing worse in concept art than uninteresting armor. At this point, I'm noodling. So I'm going to stop, damn it. I'm going to stop and just call it quits. Oh, God. Such a long paint over, but it was so much fun. So it's okay. I love design paint overs. They are my favorite. Alright. In typical me fashion, I say I'm going to stop, then I do 75 more things. Then I say I'm going to stop, then I do 35 more things. Then I say I'm going to stop, then I do 15 more things. Then I say I'm going to stop, then I do 5 more things. Then I say I'm going to stop, I do 1 more thing, and then I'm done. So, I'll be back on here in a little bit, so sit tight. That was a 3-hour paint over. I'm going to take a quick break, walk around so I don't die of a blood clot, and grab a drink, some more coffee. Then I'll be back here to finish this airship that we started the other day, and then my live stream crashed and it wouldn't let me back on. So we're going to come back here and work on this after that, get it out of the way, maybe do a third one, depends how I feel. But thanks for hanging out, thanks for asking questions, it's been a lot of fun, and I will talk to you guys soon. And yes, this will be on YouTube, so if you're subscribed to me, you'll see it. I probably won't promote it, but it'll be there, so search for artcamp orc paintover. That's what it's going to be called. And yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. Talk to you later.